Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the train to Lisbon. It was just past 11, and I was considering whether I could sneak in a roast beef sandwich before lunch when the mail dropped through the slot and skidded across the parquet like a skater on borrowed time. Fritz, who never leaves his post in the kitchen without reason or invitation, called out from behind the door. "Archie, something from overseas. It's marked urgent." His voice was as steady as the egg yolks he separated each morning, but I could hear the edge in it. I strolled over, scooped up the envelope and gave it the once-over. Pale cream stock, deep red seal, foreign handwriting. The return address read, Rua do Alecrim, Lisbon, and the name, Hugo Villar. I didn't know the name, but the seal looked like it might once have belonged to a duke or someone with an unhealthy relationship with vellum. I brought it into the office. Wolfe was sunk deep in the yellow chair, a glass of beer sweating beside him, and his nose in a treatise on Cistercian herb cultivars. I could tell he was in his monk phase again. Not a word until the orchids had been groomed, the Latin footnotes translated, and the afternoon nap threatened to make an early appearance. He glanced up. I heard the mail arrive. "What is it?" I held up the envelope. "Portugal. A Mr. Hugo Villar, whoever that is, thinks we're the solution to a problem of such magnitude he had to send airmail." I cracked the seal and unfolded the letter. The paper had a subtle weight, like it had been pressed between coins and gilt. Wolfe raised a brow but didn't move. "Read it." I obeyed. "Dear Mr. Wolfe, I am writing with the deepest urgency and a father's dread. My daughter, Isadora Villar, boarded the RMS Claremont bound from Lisbon to New York 7 days ago. She was due to arrive last Tuesday. I was notified by the shipping company that she disembarked, but she has not checked into her hotel nor made contact with anyone in my employ. She was carrying with her a priceless manuscript of considerable historic value, one we intended to sell through private channels to a vetted buyer in your city. I do not know if the manuscript is the cause or the pretext, but I fear she has been taken. I am enclosing a certified draft for $10,000 against your retainer. Please find my daughter. Please find the truth. Sincerely, Hugo Villar, Lisbon, Portugal." I lowered the paper. Wolfe reached for his beer and sipped it as though the world hadn't just shifted into a higher gear. "Well," I said, "it's not every day the missing person comes with a medieval manuscript and a certified draft." He grunted. "Spare me the embroidery. What's the date on the ship's arrival?" 3 days ago. I tapped the envelope. The RMS Claremont. Dock Tuesday, Pier 90. He set the book down, slowly. "And she has not been seen since?" "According to her father, not by anyone who's talking. She never checked into the Park Kingsley. She hasn't phoned home. He's convinced something's gone wrong." Wolfe's brow furrowed. He leaned back and folded his arms over his girth. "This manuscript. What kind?" "No details," I said. "Just considerable historic value." "Which is as useful as saying it's a diamond or a dog." He stood, a rare event when not caused by hunger or fury, and paced 3 slow steps behind the desk. That was the Wolfe version of fretful pacing, just enough to loosen the brain, never enough to make the feet sweat. Did he say what contacts she was to use in New York? No, only that she was selling through private channels, probably art dealers. He exhaled, then returned to his chair like it had filed a complaint in his absence. "Well, I detest missing persons cases. They multiply assumptions like spores, and we are at a disadvantage. No body, no witnesses, no context. Only a Portuguese nobleman's fears and an empty hotel suite." I sat down opposite him in one of the red chairs. They weren't built for long stays, but then again, no one who sat in them wanted one. "I can check the pier," I said. "Speak with the Cunard folks, porters, whoever was on shift." He nodded slowly. "Do so. Take notes. I want names, times, and confirmation that she was seen disembarking. If she vanished between ship and street, it narrows the field. If she vanished later, we must reconstruct the interval." "Want me to dig into the manuscript too?" He pursed his lips. "Yes, but carefully. I do not wish rumours of its value to reach anyone who might take advantage. This Hugo Villar, what do you make of him?" I folded the letter back into the envelope. Educated, rich, scared, stiff. He leads with paternal fear and backs it with 5 digits. The letter's either a masterpiece of urgency or the real thing. Wolfe tapped the envelope with a thick forefinger. That draft. Have Fritz take it to the bank. We'll see if Lisbon's concern converts into American currency. He leaned back and closed his eyes. I do not like girls who disappear. They bring newspapers. And Kramer. I stood. You know he'll hear about it regardless. Indeed, Wolfe said. That's why I prefer to be ahead of him. I moved to the door. And Archie? I turned. He opened one eye. Don't get sentimental about it. It's a commission, not a crusade. I'll try to remember that. As I grabbed my coat and fedora from the rack, the clouds outside pressed against the windows, soft and grey. Manhattan had the look of a city holding its breath. I stepped into the vestibule and called down to Fritz. Check deposit to the Midtown branch, it's marked urgent. Fritz took the envelope like it was dipped in acid. Shall I bring back change? I shook my head. Let them keep the change. We might need it later. I hit the pavement and headed for the pier. The fog was thicker than I liked, and the wind off the river had a Portuguese chill to it. Maybe I imagined that last part. 3 days was a long time for a girl to be gone, especially if she hadn't planned it, and especially if someone had wanted more than her company. The air off the Hudson had that stiff February bite, sharp enough to slice your throat if you turned into it wrong. The pier looked the same as it always did, industrial, impersonal, and stained by 1,000 comings and goings no one bothered to remember. I lit a cigarette as I stepped through the iron arch of Pier 90, watching stevedores haul crates like ancient machines fueled by coffee and regret. The RMS Claremont was gone, headed back across the Atlantic, but the scent of foreign salt and steam lingered in the wood and wind. A man in a navy overcoat stood near the shipping office. He wore the uniform of Cunard's port staff, neat but worn at the elbows. I strolled over. Name's Goodwin. I'm with a private inquiry firm, I said, keeping my tone light. I'm checking on a passenger who came in 3 days ago on the Claremont. Miss Isadora Villar, Portuguese, young, travelled alone. He gave me a squint that had seen too many badge flashes and not enough explanations. Talk to the manifest clerk, he said, jerking his thumb. Office in back, ask for Carlson. I did, and 5 minutes later I was inside a cramped room that smelled of glue, coffee and nervous paper. Mr. Carlson wore glasses thick enough to start fires. His desk looked like it had grown roots in the linoleum. I gave him the name and watched him leaf through a shipping ledger older than both of us combined. Yes. Villar, Isadora, first-class cabin. Disembarked at 10:42, signed out at gangway 3. He pointed to a faint scribble. Here, that's her signature. I bent over the book. The name was there, written in a careful European hand, slanted and elegant, not forged. Any luggage? Carlson tapped another column. 3 checked trunks, 2 handbags carried off, all marked received. Hotel transfer? He shook his head. She didn't use our services, said she had arrangements. I leaned back. And what do you remember of her? He shrugged. Pretty, dark hair, pale, quiet, wore gloves, had a small leather case she wouldn't let out of her hands. That sounded about right. Anyone meet her? Carlson paused. Not that I saw, but you'll want to talk to Porter Dave. He works the gangway. I thanked him and headed out. The porter, Dave, turned out to be a wiry fellow with an armload of rope and a knack for balancing his cigarette behind his ear while talking. When I gave him the name, something clicked in his eyes. Sure, I remember her. Quiet girl. Wore a tan coat with a high collar. Looked nervous, but who doesn't? Did she talk to anyone? He nodded slowly. Yeah, some fella in a Panama hat. Cream-coloured. Didn't look like dock crew. Too clean. Did they speak? She asked him if everything was ready. He said it was. She followed him. Just like that. I stepped closer. Did you see where they went? He pointed east. Cab pulled up. Not a company one. Grey. Maybe navy. No medallion. They got in and rolled off. And the luggage? He shook his head. He carried one of her handbags. The rest stayed. A guy in a peacoat came later and signed for it. Said he was with the hotel. Did the girl look worried? He scratched his cheek. Not worried. More like she was trying not to be seen. But it's a blur, pal. You see 1,000 faces a week. I only remember hers because of the hat guy. Something about him didn't fit. Describe him. Mid-30s, trim moustache, slim, navy suit, gloves but no overcoat, which stood out because it was freezing. That wasn't a dock worker, and it wasn't a tourist. I tipped him and made a note. There was something rotten under the surface. A girl steps off a ship, climbs into a phantom car with a stranger in gloves and disappears. That wasn't a family reunion. That was a snatch job. I walked back along the pier, the smell of diesel clinging to my coat. There were no cameras, no manifests for shady hats, no helpful bellhops with memories like steel traps. But I had a name, a face, a gap in the timeline. That was enough for Wolfe. When I reached the end of the block, I crossed the avenue and stepped into the nearest corner phone booth. I dropped a nickel and dialed the brownstone. Fritz picked up. "Tell Wolfe I've got her signature, a porter who saw her, and a guy in a Panama hat. No hotel check-in, luggage rerouted, no trail since the dock." Fritz relayed it, then came back. "Mr. Wolfe says, the hat matters. Find the head beneath it." I smiled. I hung up and lit another cigarette. The air still carried a damp trace of salt and coal, like the past clinging to your cuffs. 3 days. She was here, then she wasn't. Someone had docked, but it wasn't her. Not really. Not if she never made it past the edge of the water. The front doorbell rang at 3:05. That was punctuality of the sort Wolfe didn't encourage but tolerated. The kind that announced a man with too much dignity and not enough patience. I was halfway through filing the receipts from the previous week's grocery bills. Wolfe insisted on precision in records even when it came to trout. I answered the door. The man on the stoop wore a heavy camel coat with the collar up. His moustache was clipped in the European style, neat as an oath. A soft fedora rested in his gloved hand. "Hugo Villar," he said, as if the name should open any door from here to Lisbon. "Mr. Wolfe is expecting you," I said. "Come in." He stepped inside. His movements were precise, deliberate, no wasted energy, the kind of man who knew how much marble cost per tile and had never carried his own suitcase. I led him into the office. Wolfe was seated in the yellow chair, hands resting atop the arms, a posture that resembled casual repose, but meant he was already forming an opinion. I gestured to one of the red chairs. "Mr. Villar." He sat and crossed one leg over the other. His eyes swept the room, the bookshelves, the globe, the orchids glowing in their corner with a kind of botanical pride. "My daughter is missing," he said, "and I am told you are the only man in this city who can find her." Wolfe inclined his head. "I have received your letter. It was not without persuasion." Villar reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. He held it out but did not release it. "This contains full details, names, dates, the buyer's alias, and the shipping manifest." Wolfe didn't move. I stepped forward, took the envelope and passed it to him. He opened it with the tip of a letter knife and scanned the contents. Villar watched him with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "She carried with her a manuscript," he said. 15th century, Portuguese, illuminated, bound in original calfskin, known as the Cantus Vetus Lusitania, one of only 3 known copies. The other 2 reside in the National Archive in Porto and in a sealed collection in Geneva. "Yours was the 3rd, Wolfe said, still reading. "Yes, acquired discreetly in 1921 by my father, from a monastery that no longer exists." "And you intended to sell it?" "Privately, to a collector with means and discretion. The transaction was arranged through a consultant here in New York. I did not travel because I was needed in Estoril." Wolfe closed the folder and placed it on his lap. "Was your daughter complicit?" Villar's nostrils flared. "She was loyal. She carried the manuscript under direct instruction. She was not to discuss its contents, not to open it, not to let it leave her sight." "And yet," Wolfe said, "you believe she did precisely that." Villar's voice dropped. "I believe someone knew what she carried, and I believe that person took both." I spoke. "You said the buyer used an alias. Do you know his real identity?" "No, the consultant did. Alan Wintry. He arranged the sale." Wolfe tapped a finger on the armrest. "I presume you've contacted him?" "I have. He has not returned my messages." Wolfe grunted. "You said the manuscript is worth a considerable sum. Be precise." Villar's eyes fixed on him. "It was to fetch $200,000, in cash. No intermediaries, no customs declaration." Wolfe's brows rose slightly. "That's not a sum to be misplaced." "No," Villar said, "nor is my daughter." He leaned forward. You must understand, Mr. Wolfe. I would prefer the manuscript returned. I require my daughter found. If the two cannot be achieved together, then I will accept one. Wolfe's voice was even. And which one is negotiable? Villar's lips pressed tight. I have brought you 10,000. I will double it if you take the case. Wolfe shook his head. I do not negotiate under pressure, and I do not chase ghosts. He stood slowly. However, if the manuscript exists, I can determine whether it has surfaced. If it is forged, I will know. If your daughter is in this city, I will find her. He looked down at the man in the chair. But you must understand, Mr. Villar, I do not work with secrets, not for long. You will answer every question without evasion and without delay. That is my condition. Villar nodded. Agreed. Wolfe glanced at me. Archie, make a copy of the buyer notes. Then contact Wintry, invite him for tea. I doubt he'll come, I said. Then offer dinner or threat, whichever he respects more. I turned to Villar. Where are you staying? The Ambassador, Suite 5C. Travelling alone? Yes, my assistant remained in Portugal. Who packed the manuscript? My daughter. Who knew the buyer's name? Only Mr. Wintry and myself. I noted it all. Wolfe sat again. The manuscript. Did you examine it before her departure? Villar's jaw stiffened. No, it was wrapped, wax-sealed. Then you did not confirm its contents? He hesitated. I trusted my daughter. Wolfe sighed. I do not trust anyone, especially not those who do. Villar stood. You will take the case? I already have. I escorted him out. On the threshold he paused. She is a bright girl, strong. She would not have gone willingly. She didn't, I said, and I believed it. He nodded once and descended the stairs. I shut the door and returned to the office. Wolfe had opened the man's folder again. He was staring at a copy of the title page from the manuscript, photographed and printed with careful notation. He looked up. There are 3 copies, he said. Only 2 are known. Until now. He tapped the page. This one. This might be real, or it might be bait. Bait for who? He closed the folder. For anyone who still believes rare books are worth killing for. He leaned back, eyes half closed, which, I fear, is rather a long list. Ask ChatGPT. The Hotel Pierre wore its elegance like a tired debutante, still regal, but slightly faded at the corners. A doorman with more polish than muscle tipped his hat as I stepped in off Fifth Avenue. The marble floors gleamed. The chandelier overhead was old enough to have seen Roosevelt check in. The air inside was warm, too warm, the kind of heat that made you second-guess your coat but not your purpose. The lobby wasn't crowded. Mid-afternoon had thinned it to a couple of suitcases, a bellhop leaning on his cart, and a woman in a cloche hat sipping something pale in a velvet chair near the far wall. I stepped to the front desk. Behind the counter stood a man made entirely of straight lines. Thin nose, thin tie, thin lips, hair parted like a promise. Good afternoon, I said, flashing my card. Archie Goodwin, investigating a disappearance. He didn't blink. We value privacy, Mr. Goodwin. If this pertains to a guest, I'll require proper authorization. I leaned in, kept the voice calm. She's not a guest anymore. She was supposed to be. Name's Isadora Villar, arrived Tuesday on the Claremont. Portuguese, dark hair, travelling alone. He hesitated, eyes flicking to the register beneath the counter. She never checked in, he said. I know, but someone saw her here, Tuesday morning. He folded his hands. She entered the lobby, asked to send a telegram, nothing more. To whom? I couldn't say. She wrote it, paid in cash. May I see the form? I'm afraid not. We only keep carbon copies for 24 hours. Who handled her telegram? I did. Then you can tell me what she wrote. He hesitated again. A long hotel-trained pause. She asked to send one line. Tell Mr. Wintry I've arrived safely. Pierre Lobby, noon. That was enough to change the air. I kept my hands on the counter. Alan Wintry. He nodded. She wrote the name first, folded the slip. I placed the call to his office. He answered? No, I left the message with his secretary. What did Miss Villar do after that? She sat, over there. He pointed to a green armchair near the elevator alcove. She seemed apprehensive, composed but tense. She sat for perhaps 10 minutes. Then, a man approached, tall, navy suit, no hat. She stood. They spoke quietly. You recognize the man? No. Was he a guest? I checked. No room under his name. Did you hear what they said? No. They left together, no luggage. Did she look willing? He gave a long breath. She didn't look afraid, but she also didn't smile. I thanked him and turned to the armchair. Velvet worn at the edges. I could see her there, Isadora, fingers wrapped around her handbag, eyes watching the revolving door. I walked to the bellhop and tipped my hat. Say, Tuesday morning. Young lady, foreign, dark coat, sitting over there. You remember her? He nodded slowly. Sure, real elegant. Didn't ask for help, which was how I noticed. Why? Because she looked like she wanted help, but wouldn't ask. Did she meet anyone? He shrugged. Tall guy in a dark suit, quiet type. Walked up like he belonged. She stood, and they walked out. Which door? Fifth Avenue side. Cab? No, they walked east. That ruled out a lot, but not enough. I thanked him and crossed the lobby to a velvet bench. I sat, pulled my notebook from my pocket and started piecing it together. Isadora disembarks at Pier 90 at 10:42, refuses the Cunard Hotel transfer, claims to have arrangements. She arrives at the Pierre just before noon, sends a telegram to Wintry, waits 10 minutes, leaves with a man in a navy suit. She never checks in, never returns, no luggage. I closed the book. Too many straight lines, no curves, no corners. I made my way back to the desk. One more thing, I said. You said she left with a man. Did you happen to get a name from her? A last name? A destination? He gave the smallest shake of his head. No, but after they left, a call came for her. The operator said it was urgent. I told them she'd left. Did they give a name? No, only that it was from the Wintry office. That was something. Back outside, the air had dropped 10 degrees. I flagged a cab and gave the driver an address off Madison. I knew the building. Wintry's office was on the 7th floor, second from the elevator, and had a glass door with his name in gold script. Inside, a receptionist in horn-rimmed glasses and red lipstick sat behind a tidy desk. She looked like she could quote Latin but preferred French. Alan Wintry, I said. Is he in? She didn't look up. No appointments today. I'm not making one. I'm following up on a missing person. She raised her eyes. Who's missing? Isadora Villar. The silence told me everything. I stepped closer. She sent a telegram to this office Tuesday, said she'd arrived, then she vanished. She blinked, once. Mr. Wintry is unavailable. Has he been in? He was, briefly, Wednesday morning. Then? He called to say he was leaving town, said not to expect him. Did he mention Miss Villar? No. Did he take a message? She hesitated. He said to burn the carbon copy of the telegram. That was a flag waving in the fog. Did you? Yes. Did he say why? No. Where'd he go? He didn't say. I thanked her and left my card. If he calls or appears, you call me, immediately. Outside, I lit a cigarette. The flame trembled in the wind. So far, the girl had spoken to one man, left with another, and disappeared between the Pierre and nowhere. No one knew where Wintry had gone. No one knew why the message had to be burned. I stepped to a phone booth and dialed Wolfe. He answered himself, which meant he was annoyed. She was at the Pierre, I said. Sent a telegram to Wintry, waited 10 minutes, left with a man in a navy suit. Not Wintry, no luggage, no check-in. And? Reception says Wintry had the message burned. Left town, no forwarding. Wolfe's voice was like stone scraped by leather. That is idiotic. Agreed. Return, now. I hung up. The wind pressed down from the east. Somewhere, someone knew why a girl carrying a medieval book vanished in Manhattan before she unpacked her suitcase, but no one was admitting it yet. The plaque outside the building read Wintry and Kind Associates, but there was no sign of any associates, and the gold lettering was half flaked off the brass. Uptown address, midtown polish, downtown upkeep. I pushed the buzzer, got a faint buzz, and climbed to the 4th floor. Wintry's office was on the left, second from the elevator. Glass-panelled door, name in gilt script, frosted edges. Inside, the reception area was empty. No secretary, no ringing phone, just the hum of a radiator doing its best against the February chill. "Mr. Wintry?" I called. A tall man emerged from the back room, wiping ink from his thumb with a handkerchief that had once been white. "Yes, Alan Wintry. And you are?" "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." He studied me with the kind of stare that practiced its politeness in mirrors. "I see. This is about Isadora." "That's right." He gestured to the inner office. "Come in. I was expecting this eventually." The office was better dressed than the foyer. Walnut desk, Turkish rug. Framed prints of Renaissance sketches lined one wall. A pot of tea steamed on a side table. There were 2 chairs. I took the one without papers on it. "She contacted me before she arrived," he said, sitting opposite. "From the ship. She'd gotten my name from a colleague in Lisbon." "Why you?" "I'm known in her circles, discreet, able to move delicate pieces without undue visibility." I let that hang. She said she had a manuscript, wanted to know what it might be worth here, asked if I could help her find a buyer privately. I said I could, if the item was authentic. "And her father?" He exhaled. "She said he wouldn't approve of a direct sale. He wanted it handled through his own channels. She believed she had the right to act independently. She said she needed the money." "For what?" She didn't say, only that it was personal and urgent. I crossed one leg and leaned back. "When did you meet her?" "Tuesday, around noon. She sent word from the Pierre. I went to the hotel, met her in the lobby. We returned here." "No one saw her check in?" "She didn't. We only sat briefly in the lobby. Then she asked if we could talk privately. I brought her here. She stayed 20 minutes. "She left alone?" He nodded. "She said she needed to think. She had not yet decided whether to proceed without her father's knowledge." "Did she show you the manuscript?" "No. She carried a satchel but didn't open it. She said she wanted to ensure I wasn't a fraud before showing anything." "And did she?" He hesitated. "No." I narrowed my eyes. "She didn't trust you?" "She was uncertain. I assured her of my credentials, but she was cautious." "When did you last see her?" "Just before she left my office that day." "You haven't tried to find her?" I assumed she'd changed her mind, or perhaps spoken to her father. "She never contacted you again?" "No." I let silence draw its own shape. I reached into my coat, pulled out a folded note. This was found in her purse, a typed message, anonymous, told her to meet near the warehouse. His expression didn't change. "I've never seen it." I unfolded the note and slid it across. He picked it up with 2 fingers, studied it. I watched his eyes move. He set it down. "It's not my paper, nor my words." "You type?" "Occasionally, for correspondence." I pointed at the typewriter on the side desk. It was a Smith Corona Silent, a fine model but no collector's piece. "I'm going to ask a question," I said. "Then I'm going to walk over to that typewriter, and I want you to answer before I do." He met my eyes, calm. "Does your typewriter have a broken letter?" He blinked. "The R. It jams." That's all I needed. I stood and walked over. I slid a sheet into the roller, tapped out 3 words. The 3rd R in arrival stuttered on the page. I turned. "You ever type anonymous notes to clients?" He looked tired, not afraid. "No." "You think I'll believe that?" "I think I've just answered you." I pulled the page and slid it into my pocket. "Mr. Wintry, I believe you met with her. I believe she asked for help. But I also believe she never left this place without you knowing what she was carrying. I did not harm her. I didn't say you did." I started for the door. "But if she doesn't turn up, you'd better be where we can find you." He stood. "I haven't left town." "That's comforting." As I opened the door, I turned. "One more thing." "Yes?" "Why did you tell your secretary to burn the telegram?" His throat twitched. I panicked. I thought it would look like I was hiding something. "You were." I left him with the radiator hum and the ticking clock on the wall. Back on the street, the cold bit harder than before. The only thing more suspicious than a missing girl is a man who claims he didn't see her leave, and keeps a typewriter that stutters on just the right letter. It was nearly 6, and the snow outside the brownstone windows had begun to yellow at the edges, that city shade between dusk and grime. Wolfe sat in his yellow chair, arms folded, eyes closed. But his posture betrayed no sleep. He was thinking, which, in his case, was often the most volatile state imaginable. I set the logbook on the corner of his desk and waited. Fritz had brought up tea, not beer, which meant the orchids had gone well and Wolfe's mood was dangerously neutral. Wintry claims she came, spoke and left, I said. Didn't show him the manuscript, didn't commit to a sale. He says she was testing him. Wolfe opened his eyes. That is plausible, though I'd wager he's withholding something more. He's got a typewriter with a broken R, I said. Same as the note found in her bag. Paper's different, but that will be addressed later, Wolfe cut in. For now, I'm concerned with movement. You've told me this manuscript is valuable, perhaps obscenely so, and that several parties knew she was carrying it. I nodded. Her father, Wintry, possibly someone on the Claremont. And perhaps one more, someone neither Hugo Villar nor Wintry would admit to knowing. He turned his head toward the fireplace, where flames stirred the brass screen like dancers with secrets. I have decided on bait. I blinked. Bait? Yes. Wolfe gestured toward the newspaper folded beside him. There are people who spend hours sifting through the classified sections of the Times and the Post looking for signals. Antique books, stamps, ivory, things one doesn't buy publicly anymore. You think they'll respond? He lifted a finger. If we phrase it correctly, not explicit, no direct mention of the Cantus Vetus Lusitania, merely the scent of it. He reached for his dictation pad, and I crossed to the typewriter. Ready? I asked. Begin. He dictated slowly. Private collection seeks discreet party for sale of Iberian manuscript, circa 15th century. Illuminated text. Provenance unlisted. Interested parties reply, Box 17, Times Classifieds, letters only. I typed as he spoke, reading each word twice as I struck it. When he finished, I slid the paper from the roller and scanned it aloud. He listened with his eyes closed. It'll run? With payment, yes. Do so, and make certain we secure the replies. No one else must intercept them. He turned his gaze to the orchids, then back to me. Now, you will consult a bibliophile. I figured. Felix Baines, East 60th. He has a cramped shop and a noisy parrot, but his knowledge of Iberian works is precise. Show him this. Wolfe lifted a small reproduction from Hugo Villar's dossier, a scan of a decorative initial from the manuscript's second folio. The ink bled in fine red flourishes across the aged parchment. And ask what terms a dealer might use to signal interest in such a volume without naming it directly. Won't that make him suspicious? Baines is always suspicious. It is his most useful trait. I pocketed the reproduction. He's a loud talker. Do you want him alerted? No, not yet. I wish him to think we are simply inquiring. You will mention the ad, nothing more. I took my coat from the rack. As I opened the door, Wolfe spoke again. Archie. I turned. Do not let him sell you anything. I'll try. The wind slapped me hard as I stepped outside. The air had gone bitter, and flakes of snow spun like ash in the street lamps. I flagged a cab and gave the driver the address. Felix Baines's shop was wedged between a tobacconist and a tailor. A narrow window displayed a few faded bindings and a brass globe that hadn't spun since Roosevelt took office. I pushed open the door and was greeted by the unmistakable smell of foxed paper and lemon oil. A bird shrieked from somewhere deep in the stacks. Closed! The voice came from behind a stack of atlases. Then unlock it again, I said. It's Goodwin. There was a pause, then the shuffle of footsteps. Baines emerged in a houndstooth jacket and an expression that didn't believe in happiness. You, he muttered. Me, I said. Wolfe sent me. Of course he did. He motioned to a stool near the front counter. What's he after? A whisper. Baines raised an eyebrow. A whisper. I handed him the reproduction. He studied it under the desk lamp, adjusting his glasses. 15th century. Portuguese. I'd say 1470s. Possibly monastery commissioned. Fine work. Flourishes resemble the Coimbra style. Text is Latin. So I'm told. This is genuine. Wolfe thinks so. That would make it rare and extremely valuable. He set it down. Why come to me? We're placing an ad. Coded, clean, no names. Want it to catch the right fish without setting off the harbour patrol. Baines grunted. Language? Something a collector would recognize. He tapped his chin. Use illuminated Iberian devotional. Mention unlisted provenance. Add folio leaf intact. That will draw anyone serious. Anyone dangerous? He looked at me over his lenses. If someone responds quickly, they knew what they were looking for, and possibly who had it. Good. He narrowed his eyes. You expect foul play? I didn't answer. You always expect foul play, he muttered. I'll be in touch. I didn't ask you to be. He didn't smile. As I stepped out, the parrot screamed something obscene behind me. I let the door swing shut. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had changed positions but not moods. He was now facing the fire directly, glass of beer in hand. He gave you the words. He did. Good. The ad will run tomorrow. Let us see who reads between the lines. I dropped into my chair. Think anyone will bite? Someone always bites, Wolfe said. It's the hook they underestimate. Ask ChatGPT. The bell over Baines's door clattered like it was tired of being useful. Inside, the shop was no warmer than the street. The radiator thumped like a dying heart, and the scent of vellum, dust, and pipe ash hung in the air like the ghost of Gutenberg himself. Baines was hunched behind the counter with a magnifying glass and a cracked spine, inspecting a binding with the reverence of a man who thought modern publishing was a personal insult. I didn't announce myself. The floor creaked. That was enough. He glanced up. Twice in 1 week, Goodwin. Either business is good, or the world is worse. Both, I said, peeling off my gloves. The ad ran. He sniffed. I read it. Whoever worded it knew what they were doing. It's not a whisper. It's a scream muffled in velvet. Wolfe was hoping someone would scream back. Baines lowered the magnifier and pushed the book aside. Someone will. Probably someone with a trunk full of stolen missiles and a handgun in their briefcase. That specific? He reached under the counter and produced a folded copy of the Times, creased at the classifieds. He jabbed a nicotine-stained finger at the line. Illuminated Iberian devotional, circa 15th century. Folio intact. Provenance unlisted. That's a red rag to a bull, and not the kind that charges with horns, the kind that uses wire and acid and leaves no prints. Name one, I said. Carlo Fendrich, he muttered, and Elsa Morano. They're both in town, independently, which means they're up to the same thing. I leaned against the counter. Start with Fendrich. Baines tapped ash from an invisible cigarette. German extraction, educated in Florence, known for moving relics across borders that no longer exist. He once sold a relic of St. Catherine's jawbone to 3 different monasteries. If he's here, he smells a payday. And Elsa? She's more subtle, Italian-born, American-groomed. Has a gallery uptown, front for laundering rare works, claims everything's above board, but she has a taste for paper. 16th century French plays, Renaissance notebooks, Portuguese prayer books. You think one of them's after the manuscript? He looked at me hard. I think one of them already has it, or had it, and I think they realized too late that the girl was worth more trouble than they expected. I straightened. You think Isadora met one of them? He nodded. I think she was too visible, too inexperienced. If she spoke to one, the other likely found out. That makes her a target twice over. He reached for a slim volume from the shelf behind him. This came in yesterday. Not rare, not valuable. But look. He opened it. On the inside cover, in faint pencil, was a notation. Lusitania, Czech Lisbon copy. E.M. I stared at it. Elsa Morano? Who else uses that abbreviation and handles books like that? Where'd it come from? Traded in by a Columbia student who said he found it in a box of estate books. He wanted $10 for it. Did you ask who gave him the box? I did. He said a woman at the gallery on 78th. That's Elsa's place. I shut the volume and handed it back. Did she come in? Not herself. One of her boys, lean fellow with an English accent, asked if I'd seen any Iberian devotional volumes lately. I frowned. English accent? Yes, precise. Flat. Not posh. Northern, maybe. Wore gloves even inside. That didn't help much, but it didn't hurt. I made a note of it. Has Carlo been in? Last week. Asked about a collection out of Madeira. Said he had an investor in town. He smiled too much, which, for Fendrich, is cause to check your pockets. I leaned forward. Do you think either of them knew the girl? I think they knew of her. and the book, and I think they followed her from Lisbon. Maybe not directly, but through agents. A girl alone carrying something priceless. She was a lighthouse in a dark sea. Would either of them kill for it? He met my eyes. No, but someone working for them might. I folded my notebook shut. Do you think either of them saw the ad? He raised an eyebrow. Goodwin, I'd bet they dictated it to themselves before it was printed. As I turned to leave, he called out, I'd be careful. This isn't just about a book. No? No. It's about who's allowed to own history and who's allowed to erase it. Outside, the sky had darkened. Snow flurried like paper torn from forgotten ledgers. I pulled my coat tight and walked 2 blocks before hailing a cab. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe hadn't moved more than 6 inches since I'd left. He was now sipping beer and glaring at a paragraph of Latin from the manuscript folio. I gave him the rundown. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he exhaled softly. Morano and Fendrich. He rolled the names like pills on his tongue. They are precisely the sort of predators who mistake cunning for wisdom. I dropped into the red chair. Baines thinks one of them might already have it. Possibly, but if that were true, they wouldn't need to check classified ads. They'd be verifying provenance and preparing a quiet exit. Then why stay? He glanced at the orchids. Because they don't trust each other, and neither can afford to leave before the other does. I nodded. So we wait? No. He stood. We invite them, individually, politely, with the language they respect, exclusivity. Want me to write it? No, Wolfe said. I'll dictate. And when Wolfe offers hospitality, it's never warm. It's bait in linen gloves, and it always costs someone something. The call came at 10 past midnight. Fritz answered it, but I heard the change in his tone from the kitchen. When he handed me the receiver, his eyes didn't blink. Goodwin. This is Captain Montrose, 9th Precinct. We've got a Jane Doe at Pier 46 West End. Freight depot. Looks like your missing girl. I didn't need to look at Wolfe to know what he'd say. I was already buttoning my coat. The snow had turned to sleet, coating the streets in a slick shine. By the time I reached the depot, my shoes had taken on water and my mood had taken on ice. A pair of patrolmen stood at the chain-link gate, shoulders hunched. One of them waved me through without asking. The other gave me a flashlight. The warehouse loomed like an unspoken thought, long, wide, and dead quiet. Inside, the cold hit harder. The air carried oil and wood rot and something else, something that didn't belong. She was laid out near the base of a stack of sealed crates between 2 rusted dolly carts. Her coat was unbuttoned. Her shoes were still on. Her eyes, open. It was Isadora Villar. Hair dark and parted from where her head had hit the concrete. One side of her cheek bruised, the rest pale and still. Montrose crouched beside her. We didn't touch anything, he said. No sign of a struggle. Purse was still on her. I took it from him. It was leather, Portuguese, the kind stitched by hand and carried with pride. Inside were a compact, a slip of paper, and a photograph. The paper was a note, typed. Meet me by the 46th Street depot, midnight, Alan. I folded it in half and handed it back. Broken R's, I said. Matches the last one. Montrose nodded. Who's Alan? I didn't answer. Kramer's voice broke the silence behind me. Why is it every time I get a call after midnight you're standing in the middle of my crime scene? He stepped in, coat already soaked, cigar burning like a promise he didn't intend to keep. I didn't look at him. She's the one we were looking for, Isadora Villar. Thought so. We got a match off the passport in her bag. She took a beating. Just one, I said. Back of the skull. Enough to drop her. No blood trail. Someone hit her once and walked away. He glanced down. Where's the manuscript? Not here. Figures. He turned to Montrose. Bag it, tag it, lock it. I want a full sketch and measurements. No one touches her until Doc Royce sees her. Then he turned back to me. And you, don't vanish. I wouldn't dream of it. He stepped closer. You knew she was missing. You knew what she was carrying, and you didn't tell me. We told you what mattered. That wasn't your choice. I didn't flinch. She wasn't your victim until now. He exhaled. That's a technicality. The next time I have to find a body before I get a name, I'll remember how technical you like to be. He stalked off into the dark. I crouched beside her. Her eyes were still open, staring past the rafters and up into nothing. I reached out, gently closed them. There was no ceremony in it, just a courtesy. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was 1:30. Fritz had left a lamp on in the hall and a folded blanket on the arm of the red chair. I didn't take it. Wolfe was in his room. I didn't wake him. I sat in the office, staring at the empty fireplace and thinking about a girl who crossed an ocean with history in her hands and ended up a headline in tomorrow's paper, and thinking about the man who signed that note. Alan, typed, with a broken R. At 11 minutes past noon, the front doorbell rang with the kind of precision you don't get from amateurs. I'd already seen her silhouette through the frosted glass, upright posture, narrow waist, tailored coat. Even from behind the door, she had presence. I opened it. Miss Morano. Mrs., she corrected gently. But please, Elsa will do. She held out a gloved hand, dark grey leather, no creases. I stepped aside. This way. She followed me down the hall with the sound of heels that were neither fast nor shy. In the office, Wolfe remained in his chair. Fritz had arranged the orchid display with more red than usual. A coincidence, unless you believed orchids shared Wolfe's sense of theatre. Elsa Morano stopped in the threshold, glanced once around the room, and crossed to the red chair across from Wolfe. She sat without being asked. I took my place off to the side, notebook in hand. Wolfe didn't speak. She removed her gloves one finger at a time, tucked them into her handbag, and set it neatly on her lap. I believe you've heard my name. Wolfe inclined his head. Elsa Morano, proprietor of a gallery, dealer in antiquities, frequent visitor to Geneva, Lisbon, and occasionally Paris. She gave the smallest smile. I see your reputation for preparedness is deserved. He didn't return it. Why are you here? She leaned forward. I came to clear the air. There's a manuscript. Portuguese, illuminated, 15th century. I was bidding on it. From whom? She paused. Not directly. I was told a private sale might be possible. I made discreet inquiries. That's how things are done in my trade. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You never met the girl? No. You never saw Isidora Villar? Never. I didn't look up from the notebook. Wolfe remained still. You are aware she is dead? Yes. Her voice didn't shake. It's a tragedy. Wolfe studied her a moment longer. You came to this country for the manuscript? Yes. You came alone? Yes. No intermediaries? She folded her hands. I have a partner in Milan, but I make all acquisitions myself. I don't trust others with my judgment. Wolfe sipped his beer. You were not the only one interested. I know. Carlo Fendrich. And at least one private collector I don't yet have a name for. Why are you telling us this? Because I didn't kill her, and I didn't arrange anything that would put her at risk. I may be many things, Mr. Wolfe, but I'm not reckless with human life. Wolfe tapped his thumb once against the arm of the chair. What do you know of Fendrich? She exhaled through her nose. He traffics in art with no past, manuscripts without certificates, altarpieces with new varnish. He's clever, but not precise. And this other collector? European, possibly French. I've only heard whispers. Someone with Vatican contacts. And why tell us any of this? She smiled. Because if you're going to find the manuscript, you'll need a map. I'm offering you one. Wolfe blinked once. Why? Because if I can't have the book, I'd at least like the satisfaction of knowing Fendrich doesn't either. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Where were you Tuesday night? She didn't flinch. In my hotel, the Wentworth. Room service at 8. A call to Milan at 9. Alone until morning. Can that be verified? I assume the hotel logs calls. Wolfe nodded. And the man with the English accent? Works for you? She looked surprised, a flash quickly buried. I don't employ anyone with an English accent. Then he's borrowing your name. She tilted her head. He should return it. It's expensive. Wolfe stood slowly. You have been candid, but not entirely. You are lying. She tensed, a flicker behind the jaw, but didn't move. Wolfe continued. You never met the girl, but you saw her. You never touched the manuscript, but you tried to. And you say you were alone, but your gallery has received shipments this week, from Lisbon. She rose. I have done nothing illegal. I didn't say illegal. He turned from her. Mr. Goodwin will see you out. She took her gloves without a word. As we reached the hallway, she turned to me. He's as dangerous as they say. More, I said. She stepped closer. Do you believe me? I believe you wore the right perfume. She smiled again, this one different. Be careful, Mr. Goodwin. People who get too close to manuscripts tend to disappear. She left without waiting for the door. I returned to the office. Wolfe was seated again. Well? She's lying, I said. Indeed. But not about everything. No. He closed his eyes. She wants the truth found, so long as it doesn't point to her. I nodded. Fendrick? Possibly. He opened one eye. But she gave us more than she meant to. Which part? Wolfe leaned forward. She's afraid. And in Wolfe's world, fear always led somewhere. You only had to follow it patiently, all the way to the end. The morning fog over the brownstone hadn't lifted by 10. It clung like a patient illness, muting even the screech of taxis from 9th Avenue. Inside, the air was warmer, but no less grey. Wolfe hadn't spoken in over 20 minutes, a quiet that meant thoughts were being loaded like shells into a shotgun. I was in the office, checking the carbon of a letter we had sent to a bookseller in Rio, when Wolfe finally broke the silence. Archie. That was all, but it was enough. I set the letter aside and looked up. Yes? Wolfe leaned back in the yellow chair, resting one palm on the armrest, the other loosely curled beneath his chin. When Mr. Villar first described the manuscript's journey, he mentioned a ledger, a record of prior sales, discrete transactions, private owners. I nodded. He said it tracked the movement of rare Iberian texts over the last 20 years. Precisely. And yet, he has not offered it again, nor has he provided context for how his daughter came to possess such detailed knowledge of its value, should she have intended to sell it independently. You think she read the ledger? Wolfe's lips thinned. I think she knew more than she was meant to, and Hugo Villar knew it. That gave me enough to start standing. Get it? Yes, with courtesy, but not delay. He's at the Ambassador, Suite 5C, go now. I was already reaching for my coat. And Archie. I turned. If he resists, tell him it is not a request, and do not let him stall with grief. That ledger is no longer private. It is evidence. Outside, the fog moved in sheets, hanging just above the sidewalk like forgotten smoke. The cab ride was slow, the kind that made you forget time had measurements. The Ambassador Hotel had its own hush, the sort built from old money, silk wallpaper, and bellhops who never blink. The clerk knew Villar's suite without asking. He called up. After a short pause, nodded once and handed me a brass key. He's expecting you. I knocked once before opening the suite door. Villar was seated by the window, still in dressing clothes, a silk robe tied tight around his waist. A half-smoked cigarette rested in an ashtray, untouched. He didn't rise. Mr. Goodwin. Mr. Villar. The room smelled of lemon cologne and stale tobacco. A tray sat untouched on a side table. Coffee, toast, orange slices, all gone cold. I came for the ledger, I said. He blinked. What ledger? The one you mentioned in our first meeting. The one that tracks all the manuscript dealings. Wolfe wants it. Now. He didn't answer. Just turned to look at the city's hazy outline. I waited. It's private, he finally said. Not anymore. Still he sat. The silence wasn't grief. It was calculation. I stepped forward. Your daughter's dead. She carried something worth more than what's been admitted. If you think withholding that ledger keeps her legacy clean, you're wrong. If she tried to cut you out of the deal, Wolfe needs to know. We don't solve this by pretending she didn't have her own mind. His eyes flicked to me, hard, cold. She was impulsive, bright, but loyal. I said nothing. He stood slowly and walked to the writing desk. From beneath a stack of newspapers he lifted a leather-bound book, not large but dense. The spine cracked faintly as he passed it to me. Every entry is mine. Every name was vouched, every sale private, off-record and safe. Until now. He nodded once. I trusted her, but I may have trusted her too much. He stepped away and faced the window again. Return it when you're done. I didn't answer, just left, ledger in hand. Back at the brownstone, I dropped my coat on the rack and stepped into the office. Wolfe glanced up from the orchids. I held the ledger aloft. He nodded. Sit, read it aloud. The pages were aged but meticulous. Lists of manuscripts, names, dates, notes in tight Portuguese script. Each entry had a buyer and an acquisition cost, sometimes with coded phrases Wolfe asked me to translate as I read. 2/3 through, I stopped. January 1946. Cantus Vitus Lusitania. Acquisition through Monastery Portalegre. Indirect. Valued at $35,000. Intended for private retention, not for sale. Wolfe held up a hand. Continue. June 1949. Noted interest from Murano Circle. Rejected. December 1951. Paris Inquiry. Fendrick Intermediary. Rejected. March 1952. Isidora inquired after Geneva quote. Advised silence disregarded. I looked up. Wolfe was perfectly still. She wanted to sell it. Yes. And he told her not to. Yes. And she made inquiries anyway. Indeed. He closed his eyes. She knew its value. She knew her father's position. She saw opportunity. And he saw betrayal. Perhaps. He tapped his fingers once. Go back. Read the May 1948 entry. I flipped back. Codex Braganza. Sold to anonymous Brazilian collector. Routed through Lisbon Gallery. Funds received through intermediary. I. Villar. Wolfe opened his eyes. She had done this before. Looks like it. He rose, walked slowly to the globe in the corner, spun it once, then stopped it with a finger on Portugal. She knew how these things moved, what they were worth, how to sell them quietly. This was not her first step outside her father's shadow. No. He returned to the desk and lowered himself. This is not simply a murder over an object. This is conflict, between loyalty and independence, between wealth and freedom. She tried to take control of her own deal, and it cost her everything. I closed the book. Do we show this to Kramer? Wolfe shook his head. Not yet. We will use it first. Then, if needed, deliver it with the name of the man who profited most from her silence. He closed his eyes once more. Tonight, we dine quietly. Tomorrow, we hunt. It began, as these things sometimes do, with a knock that wasn't a knock. Not the brass chime of the bell, not a firm rap on the wood, just a soft thud, like someone had dropped a shoe or their conscience on the stoop. I was at the office window, not particularly occupied, and caught the glimpse of movement through the lace curtain. A figure in a dark coat turned away from the front steps and vanished down the block, coat hem brushing wet pavement like a guilty goodbye. I crossed the hall just as Fritz arrived from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a linen towel. There was no ring, he said. I know, I replied. I opened the door. A brown paper parcel sat neatly at the top of the steps, square, string-tied and anonymous. No note, no postage, no reason. Fritz leaned in closer. It smells old, he said. Ink. Glue. I bent down, lifted it. Heavy, but not too heavy. Dense like a box of memory. I brought it inside and set it on Wolfe's desk without a word. He didn't even look up from the dictionary he was referencing, something Latin and unpleasant likely. Only when I slid the letter opener under the twine and peeled back the paper did he glance over. He did not move. I parted the last fold and stopped breathing. The manuscript lay within, bound in calfskin, aged and scarred. The spine was hand-stitched, the corner tabs decorated with fading gilt. No modern forgery would dare the flourishes this one held. The vellum pages inside were delicate, some slightly curled at the edges, others crisper than they deserved to be. I opened it. The ink shimmered faintly, red and gold illuminations swirling around calligraphic Latin, margins filled with miniature flora, some grotesque, some impossibly delicate. Wolfe. He didn't answer. It's real. I presume so, he said finally. Bring it here. I did. He reached for it with deliberate care as if it might be heat or holy. He examined the cover first, then opened to the second folio, the page Villar had once shown us in reproduction. There, unmistakable, was the insignia of the monastery of Portalegre, seared faintly into the upper margin like an echo of fire. The text itself was tight, neat, and terrifyingly confident in its age. Wolfe's fingers rested on the margin, not touching the ink but near enough to sense its weight. Authentic, he said, after a full minute. From whom? He shook his head. Whoever brought it wished to erase their presence. No fingerprints, no scent. The paper wrap was clean. Yes, and no note. Wolfe turned a page. That is deliberate, a gesture without context, a threat perhaps, or a bribe. He looked up. It is too late. I raised an eyebrow. Too late for what? For her. He closed the manuscript slowly and returned it to its paper wrap. This was leverage, bargaining power, and now it is debris. You think someone panicked? Possibly, or sought to end the search without explanation, a quiet close. That won't stop us. No, Wolfe said, but it may change who we question first. He pushed the parcel toward me. Have Fritz store it in the guest room safe, then call Kramer. I didn't move. You're bringing him here? Yes, I blinked. That's rare. I wish to watch him see it, and I wish him to understand that we now hold what the killer valued most, and refused to let her keep. I stood. Anything else? Yes. Dust the parcel for prints, then burn the wrapping. That's contradictory. No, he said. It's practical. I took the parcel back through the hall. Fritz was waiting in the doorway of the dining room. Guest safe? Yes, I said. Carefully. He took it with both hands, turned and disappeared into the shadows of the corridor. I went to the office phone, dialed the precinct. A voice answered, gruff and sleepy. Kramer. Archie Goodwin. A pause. This better be good. It is. We've got the manuscript. Another pause, this one longer. Where? Right here, delivered anonymously. Wolfe wants you to see it, today. What time? Now. He hung up. I turned back to Wolfe. Kramer's coming. Good. I stood at the fireplace. You really think it's too late? Yes. He leaned back. The manuscript was the fulcrum, but the balance has tipped. I didn't speak. He continued. She died before it was delivered, meaning it wasn't ransom. It was silence. But why give it up now? He closed his eyes. Because someone thinks we're closer than we are. I crossed to the window. Outside, the fog was lifting. Not fast, but lifting. By 3:30, the drawing room was warm with the kind of silence that only builds when too many people agree to stay civil. It was the silence of wool coats unbuttoned, cigarettes held too long between fingers, and tempers kept on a leash. The manuscript lay on the desk, centre stage, rewrapped in brown paper and tied with the same anonymous string that had delivered it. Wolfe had requested, not invited, the presence of Hugo Villar, Elsa Morano, and Felix Baines. The phrasing had been careful. You may wish to be present when the manuscript's disposition is discussed. That had brought them in. Kramer came by force of duty and the promise of irritation. I stood behind Wolfe's desk. Fritz had arranged the seating to Wolfe's exact instruction. Villar in the first red chair, back straight and jaw tight. Elsa at the far corner of the settee, coat draped over her arm like a leash. Baines across from her, already thumbing through a battered notepad as if it were scripture. Kramer sat by the bookshelves, legs crossed, cigar unlit, and face promising nothing pleasant. Wolfe hadn't spoken since they arrived. He now leaned forward and placed both hands atop the manuscript's parcel. You have all come to New York, he began, because of this. The paper rustled faintly under his fingers. This is the Cantus Vetus Lusitania, acquired, hidden, coveted, and now delivered to my doorstep without a word. Its origin is no longer in dispute. He lifted the top flap of paper and peeled it back to reveal the dark leather binding beneath. Kramer gave a grunt. Elsa's eyes narrowed. Baines inhaled sharply through his nose. Villar said nothing. It was wrapped carefully, Wolfe continued. No fingerprints, no message, no indication of who delivered it. I find that suggestive. Kramer leaned forward. Suggestive of what? Wolfe didn't look at him. Of conscience. He gestured lightly toward Villar. Mr. Villar, it was your daughter who carried this. She died within hours of her arrival. Villar stiffened. His voice, when it came, was low and clipped. I have not forgotten. She believed herself justified in seeking a buyer, Wolfe said, but she underestimated the volatility of private appetite. Elsa tilted her head slightly. You believe she was killed for this? I believe, Wolfe replied, that she was killed because this became more valuable without her than with her. Baines cleared his throat. Are you suggesting someone in this room? I'm not suggesting, Wolfe interrupted. I'm watching. He stood slowly and walked behind the desk. I have read the Lisbon ledger. I have seen the telegram she sent. I have examined the paper on which her death appointment was typed, and noted the distinctive broken R. His eyes flicked to Baines. You own a Royal Arrow, 1936 model, yes? Baines nodded. It's common. Yes, so is murder, Kramer growled. Wolfe, you called me here to hear something concrete. If you're building a mood, make it fast. Wolfe ignored him. The manuscript is authentic, and yet it was not offered for sale in Lisbon, nor delivered directly to any known buyer. He glanced at Elsa. You bid for it. I did. Through whom? I do not disclose intermediaries. Even now? Her eyes met his. Even now. Wolfe looked at Baines. You handled similar documents for the National Iberian Library. On occasion? Did you ever appraise this volume? No. Wolfe's brow creased. Then why did your handwriting appear in a margin of the Lisbon ledger next to its entry? Baines's mouth opened, closed. I don't recall. Wolfe sat. I do. He tapped the manuscript. This book made its way through more hands than Hugo Villar ever knew, and one of those hands silenced the last witness who could name them. He folded his arms. Now, I ask a question. The room held its breath. Which of you believes this should return to Lisbon? No one spoke. Then, Villar. It belongs to the country. Elsa arched a brow. That's a convenient patriotism. Would you say the same if your daughter had sold it legally? She didn't. She tried, Baines muttered. Villar's head snapped toward him. You know nothing of her. I know she reached out to Geneva, Baines said, and I know she asked for an estimate. She was inexperienced. She was determined, Elsa added. Wolfe raised his voice just slightly, enough to still them. The question was not whether she intended to sell it. The question was who told her it was worth doing. Silence again. I believe, Wolfe said, that one of you made an offer, quiet, private, and untraceable. I believe she considered it. I believe she hesitated. He glanced at the manuscript, and I believe that hesitation cost her the chance to reconsider. Kramer stood. You saying this was premeditated? No, I'm saying it was convenient. He faced Baines. You met with her? No. You typed a note? No. You sent her to a depot? Baines stood as well, face flushed. You can't prove that. No, Wolfe said calmly. But the ink on that note matches your ribbon, and the phrasing matches 3 letters in your drawer, which Archie has now copied. Baines froze. You searched my office? Archie did, Wolfe said. You had no right. I had reason. Baines sank back down. Elsa broke the silence. So, what happens now? Wolfe stood. Now, the manuscript is no longer missing. The motive is exposed. The ledger is preserved. He looked at Kramer. And the killer is here. Kramer narrowed his eyes. You're sure? Yes. Baines stood. This is absurd. You have no... Wolfe's voice was colder now. Alan Wintry's name never appeared in the ledger. Baines paused. What? Wolfe stepped toward the centre of the room. Isadora told her father she intended to use Wintry, but her real contact was someone who could name every past transaction, someone who knew the Geneva buyer, someone who made a second copy, not of the manuscript but of its lineage. He turned to Baines. You forged a parallel ledger. When she refused to sell it your way, you panicked. Baines's mouth opened. That's... You sent the note. You led her to the depot. You hit her once hard. You didn't mean to kill her. You meant to scare her, but it was too much. The silence was total. Even Kramer stopped breathing. Then Wolfe stepped back behind the desk. The manuscript was your way out, but now it's mine. He turned to Kramer. You'll find the forged ledger in Baines's apartment, inside a copy of Codices Iberica, first edition, red binding, second shelf on the left. Kramer pulled out his notebook. Baines sat, finally, head in hands. Villar looked older by a decade. Elsa looked untouched. Wolfe touched the manuscript again. This should return to Lisbon, intact. Villar nodded once. Wolfe stood. Archie, see them out. I did. When the last coat passed through the front door and the silence returned, Wolfe reached for his beer. He lifted the glass, took one sip, and said quietly, The train to Lisbon has already departed, but at least we know who missed it. He He closed his eyes and did not speak again for the rest of the evening. The manuscript sat under lamplight like a corpse waiting for the coroner. Wolfe leaned back in the yellow chair, fingers steepled against his chest. The brown wrapping had been removed again, folded with geometric care on the corner of the desk. The leather-bound volume lay exposed on the polished surface, pristine in its stillness. "Archie." "Sir?" "Bring the Geneva letter." I crossed to the drawer, pulled the folder Wolfe had marked with a red wax dot, and handed him the sheet. He held it for a moment, then passed it to Kramer, who was parked in his usual red chair, legs apart, fedora tucked between his knees. Wolfe waited. Kramer scanned the page slowly, his brows folded like a fault line. "What the hell is this?" "A confirmation," Wolfe said. "That the book was sold weeks ago?" "That the real book was." Kramer stared. "You saying this one, the one we just chased halfway through Europe, is a forgery?" Kramer tossed the page down. "You better have more than a hunch." "Indeed." Wolfe rose. I felt the shift in the room like a tide coming in. He rarely stood without a reason. "This manuscript," Wolfe said, circling the desk, "contains 32 vellum folios stamped with the Duquesne watermark." He lifted a page with 2 fingers. "Yet the Duquesne mill ceased production in 1932. This page, Mr. Kramer, is from 1937. Kramer's jaw shifted. "Plenty of forgeries use old paper." "Yes, but not usually ink matched to a substitute pigment introduced in 1941. He turned the page again. "The manuscript is fine work. I might almost admire it." He turned. "But I do not." A pause. "Because it was made with intent to deceive more than one buyer." Elsa Morano, seated at the far end of the couch, straightened. "You mean someone planned to sell this twice?" "No, Miss Morano." Wolfe folded his arms. "I mean someone did." Felix Baines rose from his chair as if drawn by a wire. "That is slander." "It is truth." Baines turned to me. "You let this go on?" "I go where the facts land." Wolfe raised one finger. "Do sit, Mr. Baines." He did, slowly. "You met Isidora Villar in Lisbon. You appraised the manuscript for her. You told her it was worth more than she suspected." Baines scoffed. "I did no such thing." "You did," Wolfe said. "And you offered to handle its sale." "No." "Then why," Wolfe asked, "do you have 2 matching photographs of the manuscript, each with different pagination?" Baines faltered. "What?" Wolfe turned to me. "Archie." I stepped forward, handed the envelope Wolfe had readied that morning. Inside were 2 black and white enlargements. One showed a page labelled Folio 19, the other Folio 22. Except the handwriting, the ink density, and the angle of the marginalia matched. "Exactly." Baines took the photos. His hand trembled. They must have been mixed." "No, they are copies of the same page, labelled differently." Wolfe stepped closer. "Because you made 2 copies." Baines sat. "The real manuscript," Wolfe said, "was sold in Lisbon 3 weeks ago to a private museum. Isidora carried one of your forgeries to New York." Elsa inhaled sharply. "She thought it was real." "Yes." "She thought she was ransoming something worth dying for." Wolfe did not blink. "Yes." Baines pressed a hand to his mouth. Kramer stood. "Let me get this straight. You're saying she was sent here with a fake?" "Not knowing it," Wolfe turned. "She believed she could auction it quietly. She didn't know about the second copy." Elsa whispered. "Who was the other buyer?" Wolfe shook his head. "That we don't know yet, but the forger did." Kramer exhaled. "So this whole circus was to recover a fake?" Wolfe nodded to me. "Archie, the other item." I reached into the file cabinet and drew out a torn envelope, still bearing the Lisbon customs seal. Inside, a shipping manifest, dated 2 days before Isidora's departure. Item, bound manuscript. Declared value, $12,400. Recipient, A. Vintner, Zurich. Elsa frowned. "That's not Geneva." "No," Wolfe said. "It's a front. A collector in Bern used that alias in 2 other transactions." Kramer narrowed his eyes. "Baines?" "Not the buyer, but the seller." Wolfe tapped the desk. "The forgery he sent with Isidora was bait. The real one had already moved." I added, "He needed to delay the Lisbon officials. She was the distraction. Elsa looked down. So she died for nothing. Wolfe's voice softened. She died because greed needs shadows, and Baines gave her one. Baines didn't speak. Wolfe gestured. Kramer. Yeah? You'll find a set of engraving plates in Baines's apartment, cabinet beneath the work table. Kramer raised an eyebrow. You've been busy. Archie has, Kramer turned. You want to press charges? Wolfe closed the folder. That depends on whether the second copy resurfaces. Elsa asked. And if it doesn't? Wolfe looked to the window. Then someone else dies for paper. I stepped out to call the station. The night outside was cold. When I returned, the manuscript was gone from the desk. Wrapped again, retired. Wolfe sat motionless, eyes half closed. He spoke without turning. This copy was good. Too good. He reached for his beer. And when imitation becomes indistinguishable from truth, Archie, someone always pays. I said nothing, and the manuscript, false or not, glowed like gold under the lamplight. The morning was cool but clear, the sunlight glancing off the polished surface of the globe in Nero Wolfe's office. A faint scent of damp leather, linseed oil and orchid pollen hung in the air. The yellow chair was occupied, as always, by Wolfe, seated with an almost geometric stillness. I stood to the side, notebook closed, pencil waiting on Wolfe's cue. The room was quiet. No visitors yet. No sounds beyond the faint tick of the wall clock. Then Wolfe spoke. Archie, bring Mr. Villar in. I crossed to the door and opened it. Hugo Villar was standing in the front room, hands clasped behind his back, spine stiff as a pageboy's pole. Mr. Wolfe will see you now. He gave a short, humorless nod and entered past me, like a man walking into a tribunal. The red chair across from Wolfe was already positioned. Villar took it with reluctant grace, adjusting his cuffs but not his expression. Wolfe regarded him with lidded eyes. I have asked you here, Mr. Villar, not to accuse, but to clarify. I am at your service, Villar said, but his tone was carefully neutral. Wolfe closed his eyes momentarily, opened them again. You kept a ledger, Wolfe began. One you presented as complete. It was not. A transaction is missing. Villar stiffened. You refer to a fabrication? I presented you with all I had. You did not, Wolfe said calmly. The sale of the original manuscript by your daughter. You omitted it. Villar exhaled, shallow and audible. I did not know at the time. Wolfe raised a finger. You did. You found out weeks before you contacted me. You learned of it. You confronted her. She refused to name the buyer. Villar did not answer. Wolfe continued. That refusal frightened you, and you feared exposure. So, you hired me, not to retrieve anything, not even to reveal the truth, but to preempt it. That's not... You used me, Wolfe said flat, to locate an enemy you could not see, an invisible threat. You wished to protect your name, so you gave me a fiction and waited to see what I found. Villar's mouth opened slightly, then shut. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers curled slowly on the armrests. I did not kill her. No, Wolfe said, you did not. The room seemed to draw tighter around that sentence. But, Wolfe added, you may have spoken to someone who did. Villar blinked. Someone you trusted, someone with muscle or desperation. You did not give the order, but you gave enough. There was a pause. I watched Villar's throat move as he swallowed. He shook his head. I asked someone to find the buyer, that was all, just to find them. I never asked for harm. That is not a defense, Wolfe said. It is a confession of cowardice. Villar rose suddenly. I came to you to protect my daughter's name, to find her killer. Wolfe did not move. No, Mr. Villar. You came to protect your own. I saw Villar's face then, not the old stoic mask of the conductor or the grieving father, but something cracked at the edges, haunted and dry with fear. He turned to me. You've no children, Mr. Goodwin. You wouldn't know what it means. No, I said, but I've worked with a man who doesn't take kindly to clients lying in his office. Villar looked back at Wolfe, who had closed his eyes again. There is still a chance, Wolfe said, to contain this, if you cooperate. Villar remained standing. You'll want names. Yes, Wolfe said, and records. Who you spoke to, who might have seen the real manuscript. Villar nodded once. I'll bring them. He turned to leave. Mr. Villar, Wolfe's voice was not raised. He stopped. "There is something else," Wolfe said. "One more lie. The ledger was altered in your own hand." Villar did not deny it. "I thought if I could hold the page, if I could control the story, it would matter." "It does," Wolfe said, "but not in the way you hoped." Villar left then, quietly. When the door clicked shut behind him, Wolfe opened his eyes and looked at me. "Observe, Archie. The truth always leaks through the cracks, no matter how carefully laid the cement." I nodded. "I'll type it up." "Do, and call Kramer. Tell him the barrel has begun to leak." "Will do." I turned, paused at the door. "Wolfe?" "Yes?" "Think he's telling the truth now." Wolfe sighed. "A man who lies to hide shame is not the same as one who lies to kill, but I trust neither." I nodded again and left to make the call. Inside the office, Wolfe remained where he was. The yellow chair creaked faintly. Outside, the light through the brownstone's curtains had shifted slightly, but inside, everything was still. The warehouse on 15th and Piermont hadn't seen regular traffic since Prohibition. The doors still bore faded paint where old numbers had flaked away, and the rusted lock I'd jimmied earlier sat harmless in my coat pocket. Inside, the air was sour with mildew and rat musk. Dust curled in the beams of my flashlight as I moved toward the center of the room, boots scuffing against the warped wood floor. I kept one hand in my pocket, on the little Colt Wolfe insisted I carry when playing bait. We'd laid the bait that morning, a call placed to a number Daphne said Baines used, offering a buyer, discreet, rich and quick to part with cash for literary curiosities. I'd given a burner number, told him to meet me at the warehouse at 5. He was already 5 minutes late. The warehouse door creaked. I didn't turn. Bootsteps, measured, careful. Then his voice. "You're the buyer?" I smiled and turned slowly. "No, I'm the guy with the coat and the patience. Let's keep this civil." Baines looked the same. Rumpled trench coat, pasty complexion, dark eyes that moved like a pickpocket's hands. But tonight, his right hand was in his coat pocket. And the bulge said pistol. "You said there was money?" I said the buyer had money. But let's get something straight. Nobody buys without seeing the merchandise. "You think I brought it with me?" "I think you brought something. Maybe not the real one, but you came ready to deal." He stepped closer, angling slightly. "What are you, a broker?" I shrugged. "I'm the door to the vault. The man I work for, he's the vault." Baines frowned. "Wolfe." I raised a brow. "That quick?" "You've got his stink. Precise words, precise shoes." He smiled. "That fat genius sent you here to trap me?" "No," I said. "He sent me to listen." He paused. The hand in his pocket didn't move. "You already know about Isadora." I didn't speak. He took a step forward, then another. "I didn't kill her. I didn't know she was dead." "You ran," he exhaled. "She fought back. She scratched me, drew blood." "She had the manuscript." "Yes." "You tried to rob her." "Yes." "Because?" He licked his lips. "She said no. She wouldn't sell to me. Said someone already had it, that it wasn't mine to take." "So, you followed her?" He nodded. "I waited outside her father's place. She left that night. I confronted her 2 blocks down. She pulled a key out like it was a knife." He raised his empty hand, fingers trembling. "I grabbed her bag. She hit me. I shoved her. She fell." He looked down. "I ran. I thought she'd get up. She didn't. I know that now." I let that sit. He turned his back to me, face toward the stained window. The light from the street lamp sliced across his profile. "I didn't mean to kill her. Intent doesn't bring her back." Baines let out a noise, half laugh, half breath. "Tell Wolfe he wins." The door behind us slammed open. Boots hit the floor hard. Kramer, gun drawn. Felix Baines, hands where I can see them. Baines froze. Then slowly, carefully, he raised both arms. "I'm not resisting." "You're damn right you're not." Kramer cuffed him, tight and fast. Baines didn't fight it, just stared at me with eyes gone hollow. "I didn't think she'd die." "You didn't think," I said. Period. Kramer led him out without another word. I stayed. The warehouse was empty again. In the stillness, I pulled out my notebook, scribbled the time, then I shut it, and went to tell Wolfe. The sun was low in the west, slanting through the curtains like quiet amber through velvet. The air inside the brownstone was still, hushed, as if the case had drained it of breath. I sat at the typewriter in the office, my fingers hovering. The desk lamp made a soft oval on the paper. I could hear Fritz humming in the kitchen, faint, off-key. The hum was a good sign. Wolfe exhaled and settled into the yellow chair. His beer glass clinked as he brought it to his lips. He didn't glance at me. He never did at the start of dictation. "Are you ready, Archie?" I pressed the keys. "Shoot." Subject: the recovery and subsequent verification of the Lisbon manuscript, Wolfe said. "Commence," I typed. His voice came steadily, unhurried, the cadence of finality. On the matter of the stolen manuscript known colloquially as the Villar Opera, this investigator was retained under circumstances both vague and emotionally volatile. Miss Isadora Villar appeared at this office under duress. A murder occurred within 72 hours. The manuscript was, at that time, believed to be in this city. It was not. I paused. Wolfe sipped. "Continue," he said. "Through investigation, it was revealed that the original manuscript had been transferred to Lisbon by private courier. A transaction had occurred weeks before our engagement. The forged manuscript which catalyzed this affair was produced post facto." I typed. Wolfe watched me now, eyes narrowed. He always did this part himself, the moral appendix. "Hugo Villar is exonerated from legal guilt," he said, "yet not from ethical vacancy. He knew the manuscript had departed American shores. He knew his daughter concealed the sale. He engaged us not for recovery, but for insurance against exposure." I paused again. "Do you want that in there?" I asked. Wolfe looked at the ceiling. "Yes," he said. "Let him read it and sweat." I resumed. The keys were smooth under my hands. The clack was the only rhythm left in the office. "Felix Baines has been charged with multiple counts," Wolfe said. "Forgery, theft, criminal impersonation. His confession, though not unsolicited, was illuminating. His desire for the manuscript was monetary. His behaviour was brutish. His remorse feigned. That he left Miss Villar alive is less to his credit than to her resistance." I kept the phrasing, though I didn't like it. Baines hadn't expected her to die. That much was clear. But Wolfe had his standards for prose. "Inspector Kramer, under protest, executed the arrest," Wolfe continued. "My role concluded there. I charged the agreed fee, nothing more." He reached for his beer. I waited. "New paragraph," he said. "Final remarks?" I asked. "Yes." The lamp threw a halo on the paper. Wolfe inhaled slowly. "The preservation of art is an uncertain industry. The price of legacy is often blood. It is my opinion as a private citizen that such costs are avoidable. It is my opinion as a professional that fools will always pay them." I looked up. "That's it?" "Indeed." He leaned back. I tore the sheet from the roller and stacked it. The office felt larger now somehow. The case had left a vacuum. I stood. "Want me to bring the orchids in?" "No," he said. "Tomorrow." I turned to go, then stopped. "She was smart," I said. "Isadora." Wolfe nodded once. "But not wise." I left the office. The stairs creaked once beneath me. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to my room and sat by the window. Outside, Manhattan blinked and exhaled. Lights flicked on across the rooftops. I thought of her. Not the ledger, not the forgery, not the opera, just her. She had wanted to protect something. That's all. That's what the whole damn thing was about. A woman trying to keep a piece of her father alive. And in the end, the manuscript made it to Lisbon. But she didn't. I got up, loosened my tie, and lay back on the bed. The brownstone was quiet now. Even the radiator hiss had gone still. Silence returned, like a coat you hang up, familiar. And somewhere, beneath orchids and yellow lamplight, Wolfe poured another beer.